Have you ever wondered how educators and community members can support immigrant families, undocumented youth, and individuals with DACA? That's exactly what this podcast is going to explore. Join us to learn more about these topics, listen to our guest stories, and explore resources to support students and their family. I'm your host, Dr. Gerardo Mancilla. I immigrated to the United States at a young age and am currently working as an associate professor of education. This is the Educators and Immigration Podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of Educators and Immigration. Today we're going to be talking with Tunji Lesi, Mohammed and Sarriang Ceesay, and they're here to talk about the African Center for Community Development. The African Center for Community Development is a nonprofit organization which promotes the well-being of the immigrant African community in Madison and Dane County. The organization was developed by members of the African Association of Madison in 2014 and became active in 2018. The organization supports the increasing African population in the area through services including education, employment, immigration, and family reunification. 3 of the major programs that the center currently has include Transitional Cultural Literacy Program, the Pandemic Assistance or Emergency Assistance Program, and the Community Development Programs. In the future, the center also hopes to develop programs to continue supporting the immigration process, youth and mentoring programs, cultural exchange programs, and provide legal resources for the community members. It is very exciting to have you all here today, and I would like to get us started if I could have each of you go around and introduce yourselves. And Tunji, if I could start with you, that would be great.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us. My name is Tunji Lesi, and originally I came from Nigeria as an immigrant. So in Madison, I'm proudly to be an immigrant. Right, and the immigrant population in Madison is growing very fast. And that was one of the reasons why the African Center for Community Development was formed, to particularly cater for the immigrant population from Africa. Africa, as you know, is a continent of about 54 countries. So there are so many needs for people, immigrating to the U.S. So we think it is a good idea to have these people be able to navigate all of the resources that are available here, and for whatever they want to do, how they will, integrate into the fabrics of the community here and become productive citizens of the community. Africans generally do not like to rely on anyone. They will strive to do whatever they have to do to succeed. Right, and the culture, even though there's so much diversity in Africa because of the history of colonization, right, but the culture generally is that Africans are very respectful and very mindful of what they should do and how they should cope with the things or face the goal that they set for themselves. So, that's who we are generally. And the beauty here is that we feel welcomed in the community. We can relate to the community. Most of us that came in here, came in generally at the beginning to study through scholarships or even self-sponsored educational institutions with the hope of finishing and going back to the different countries in Africa. And that used to happen for some time. In the 70s, in the 60s, 70s, a lot of Africans came to other countries, went to other countries, finished their education, got their degrees, and they went back home with, the abundance of life that they were looking for, and they got them. But, things have changed too. The whole world now is connected. It's a small village now. You could travel from here to somewhere in Africa and come back the same day or second day, So it is that fast, unlike when people used to come by ship for several weeks, on the high seas, right? So, the things are different now and people are staying, right? There is intermarriage, there is, other things. People meet themselves here and then they decide to have children. The children nowhere but here. and therefore they develop around here. And that, again, ties down the parents to say, they have to make sure that the children are okay before they go back to Africa, if they ever want to go back. For instance, when I first came here, I was banking on, 5 years. I would stay here for 5 years and I would go back. Right. My children came with me, and the idea was that, okay, I didn't want to leave my children without some close supervision. So I had to resign my job back in Africa, in my country, Nigeria at that time. And I came here, and I was thinking, I would just stay for 5 years and go back. My 5 years has turned to 30 years. so that's where we are. So everywhere is home. That's one of the things that we say in Africa. So my colleagues here will also, talk about things like that. So I will allow them to also come in and talk about it.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I could definitely relate to that idea of you think you're going to be there for a certain amount of time, and then before you know it, you're there for a couple of years more, and then a couple of years more. And thank you for providing the historical background to the center and why it was developed and how important that is for the whole community, as well as the diversity that exists, as well as we think about the language, the different migrant populations that are coming as well. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Amma, did you want to introduce yourself and a little bit about yourself and how you also got involved with the center?
My name is Amma Mohammed. I came to Madison to school at UW-Madison through a wonderful program called the Professional French Master's Program. And the plan was to do the program and then go for my internship abroad. And COVID hit. So I got involved in the African Association first, and I learned through one of the African Center board members that there was a youth program called the Transitional Cultural Literacy. So, COVID had hit and the program was restructuring to go online, and they were looking for volunteer tutors to start with the kids whilst the formidable tutor would prepare the materials to transition. So I joined for 1 month. I loved it because it was a great experience, talking with kids from different backgrounds, with parents. Most of the kids were born here in the U.S., and about 60% had gone back to Africa. And so just creating this platform for dialogue, for them to talk about their experiences, in an environment where they usually don't get that in schools and in the neighborhood. So it was great. And through that, I completed and did my internship and worked a little bit and came back to the African Center to work as the community outreach coordinator. So it's been a wonderful journey being there for a year and a half. And, because Africa is so diverse in terms of population, languages, cultures, food, traditions, you name it, fashion, everything is there. So we have seen so many people here working closely with our compatriots, and providing wraparound services for them has been a meaningful thing and very impactful. So I am glad to be part of this journey, trying to help community members, navigate the resources here in Madison and Dane County, as well as help them navigate the workforce development resources and education and stuff like that. So it's been a good journey, and I'm glad to be part of it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And as you brought up the idea of COVID and how everything changed during COVID, the importance of creating those spaces to be able to have that space for people to talk, to check in, to make sure that you're continuing your routine while also being able to be helped and provided at the same time, because everything changed for everybody during
exactly.
that time too. So thank you so much, and thank you for sharing your experience as well. Sarriang, what about yourself?
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be part of this discussion. My name is Sarriang Ceesay, and I'm also originally from the Gambia. Gambia is a small country, and if you look through the map, it is surrounded by Senegal. That specification has to be because people find it difficult to find Gambia where it is. It has a population of about 2 million people. I originally studied here. I went to Northwestern University and I studied economics. But I actually went back home and I worked in the government as a civil servant, as a senior civil servant. My highest positions in Gambia was the Deputy Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Finance, and I was the Director General of Customs and Excise. That was an important and stressful job because the Customs and Excise was the main revenue earner of the country, and we collected almost 70% of revenue. So it was a very stressful job. But as fate will have it, I left one stressful job for another because I had a job at the Economic Community of West African States called ECOWAS. ECOWAS is to West Africa as the European Union is to Europe. It is an economic community which tries to bring the economies of West African states together, the 16 states, to create economics of scale, to create a free trade area, hoping that those economic of trade will contribute to the development and the living standard of the people. ECOWAS, it's just like a government. It has an executive secretariat. It had a parliament. It had a court of justice. It had a whole health organization. And it has a gender center. I was the director of finance and administration of the parliament. During that time, my wife also was a career civil servant, but she spent all her time at the American Embassy. And if you work at the American Embassy, you are considered as an employee of the State Department, and if you work for 15 years, you have the right to immigrate. So we thought we were blessed with 4 children. We thought that we had an opportunity to bring our children here and to educate them. That's how we came here. I retired from ECOWAS at the age of 16. I came here, and it turned out that the first guy I met as my tax guy is Tunji. He's a modest guy, but he's a CPA, and he runs an accounting firm. And I had tax issues, and he became a friend and mentor to me. So when I came also, I worked at the Department of Revenue, Wisconsin Department of Revenue. I retired in December. And when I came to him he said, look, you've retired, but I'll take you out of retirement. And that's how I got involved with the African Center. When I joined the African Center in March, and they were running a very robust undocumented immigrant program. And he decided to make me a manager to manage that program. But it's one of the most exciting things that we have done. Up to date, we have helped and touched the lives of almost 105 immigrants from almost 20 different African countries. It gave us notoriety. The first thing as an African immigrant now, if you come to Madison, they will say, go to the African Center. They will help you. They have resources. They will help you. They'll give you direction. I thought that was a noble job. And to my mind, the program has been managed very well. And there is still demand for resources. The program is finishing, but we have a lot of immigrants now still asking for help.
And when you mentioned the immigrant community coming in, I'm assuming it was the wraparound services that you were talking about, that it was not only just with housing, then thinking about the food, and then thinking about like where you're going to live. Like, I'm assuming it was all of that was also part of the program. Or were there other things that were also important to mention as we think about what is needed in the community?
Yeah, at the beginning when the immigrants come, the first thing they think of is legalizing their status. And one of the biggest factors, is legal fees. And also we provide that. Then they begin to think of sustenance, how to get a job, how to move around. And those are the type of resources we do provide.
I was going to just follow up with, you mentioned the program's ending. Is that in terms of funding, or is that something that if people wanted to donate to the center, is that one of the programs that they could donate to?
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much for that question. Because, again, I want to thank my colleagues here, Ambassador and Amma. They've been very wonderful in, implementing all of the programs that the center is coping with. Now, talking about the undocumented immigrant program, first, we have to be appreciative to the city of Madison for giving us that initial funding. And it was made clear that it was just going to be a one-off thing, right? But, where we are right now, that a lot of people are still coming. Very, very grateful for the city of Madison, because I think it is unique for the city of Madison to have done that. Many other states in the U.S. are not doing that. I know of one other state close by, but they're not doing that specifically the way they have handled it. So we're grateful to them. Again, the whole objective is for, when Africans, immigrants come in here, they're not coming here to sleep. They want to work, right? They want to school. They want to make sure that they improve their lots. And, as anyone will know, if you travel to foreign countries, it is not an easy thing. You may not even know your right to your left, right? I used to have a colleague who came here. He's gone back now. And he was the controller of a big company back in Nigeria. He came in here. And so for 2 months or 3 months, he didn't get a job, right? Not because he was not qualified, but because of, it's strange, it was new to him, right? And that created a number of problems for him personally. Somebody who had been working all his life, and then he came here for 2 months, sitting down at home. It's like, what is going on with me? So that became an issue. But fortunately, he had the support of his family, just like every one of us. When I first came in here, I was to move to, I came to Madison because Madison was number one city to raise children. And that was my whole, purpose, right? That I wanted my children to be, educated and be okay. I was to go to another state, right? Incidentally, the company that I was going to work for moved out of the U.S., so I stayed in Madison. The reason why I'm mentioning that is that it's very difficult to adjust in a new place, right? It requires a lot of support, a lot of, even if it is just support within your community, where they can tell you, okay, if this is what you want to do, this is the way to approach it. Go to this place and you will have some help here. Things like that. It is so important to any immigrant. Otherwise, they could run crazy, right? If, like I said, if somebody has been working for years and then gets in here and it's not, no job, nothing, it's difficult to adjust like that. So therefore, when this idea of having a community center here came up, the whole community rallied around it and said, yes, we've got to do this. We know the cost is high, and we know we're going to count on the generosity of the people in the community and generally everybody in the U.S. Because diversity, many people do not know what diversity means. It's beyond just race, different ideas. If you have diversity, the outcome of your decisions will actually be better than if you are just following a silo, right? So, that needs to be emphasized. Going back to what I was saying, the center also realizes that, different cultures, how do you blend these cultures? Immigrants coming in, they're coming in with different cultures, diversity of cultures. Then there's culture here as well. Every country or every community has a culture. Yes. So how do we blend this and make sure that the best of all the cultures emerge as what everybody will emulate? It will only be nice for all of us to be that. So that was one of those things why we started the African Center for Community Development, including making sure that the children that are born here are confident and proud in the culture of their skin and the cultures that they have, and they can understand it. Also understand the culture that they are meeting, and they can now compare and now do some kind of exchange among their peers in schools to say, hey, this is the way we do this. This is the way you are doing this. Oh, okay, maybe I will follow your example and do something better. Or you can also get something from what we are doing, how we respect families, how we make sure that everybody is catered for. Those are the things that can only improve the community that we all belong to. So those were the reasons why the African Center is developing so many programs. There are many programs that are, some of the things that we are doing, COVID affected it, and the education also affected it. We have vision of so many things that we want to do. In the area of education, we want to make sure that whatever is happening in the schools here, we also want to transmit those back home so that whatever is happening over there too can be compared, right? If there is a research going on somewhere, right, and people here know about it, maybe it will be of interest to them. Again, the world is a small village now, so that is what is keeping us kicking.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate it, kind of you mentioned about building the communities, about addressing the whole being. It could be the employment, it could be the family, it could be the children. It's basically addressing everyone. And also that adjustment of different cultures, as you discussed it as well, to talk about like what does it mean to have the diversity of cultures come in, but then also the culture that's being here that they're adjusting to simultaneously as well. So as all three of you have talked about like different migrant groups that have historically that have come through, and then we also have newer refugee populations that are also coming. Can you talk a little bit about the newest refugee population that you've noticed here in Madison?
Yes, I will let any of my colleagues take that.
Yeah, so the trend started in the 60s where a lot of people came in as international students and they decided to stay, have families or move their families here. And then so many people came through school and other people moved from different states and realized that, well, Madison is a nice place to be, Wisconsin, so they moved. And now the trend is including those who are moving here, like economic migrants from other states. There are also people who are coming in through the borders. Some are facing persecutions back home, political, you name it, and requesting asylum. So many people, you can just imagine where Africa is, but people are coming through the borders, walking miles and miles and moving with trucks and coming to the border. So it's a difficult journey and you can't even imagine it because you look at the distance, you're like, wow, people have seen so many things. So that is a trend aside the refugees from the Congo and in Sudan and Cameroonian refugees coming in because of the civil war. In Cameroon, we've seen some people coming in from Somalia as well. And so anytime there is any political instability fueled by the current coups, in Africa, just in the space of 2 years, there are more than 3 coups that have even happened. And one happened in Niger just a few weeks ago. So all these political instabilities are fueling the migration and having people run away and come to places like the U.S. To seek asylum. So I also wanted to mention that, as Mr. Lesi said, even people who have been through these experiences, they come and they still want to contribute to the economy. They want to work. Those from non-English speaking countries, they want to learn English. So we refer most of them to Madison College, to their ESL program, and even through their Undocumented Immigrant Support program. We've had testimonies that people who got their assistance Some people have had their work permit and they are so excited about because they are really eager to work. So now there is influx of people coming in through the border, and we're hoping that there'll be more and more resources for organizations like ours to be able to support them and ensure that everyone who comes here will be living a fulfilled life and, most importantly, contributing to the economy of Wisconsin.
The thing is that the experience I've had a little experience so far is that we had two types of immigrant populations here. There's the immigrant population that were underground, people who came here, overstayed their visa, and they went underground hoping that they'll have avenues of regularizing their status. Those people were heavily affected by the COVID, the sequestration, the consequences of sequestration. During the COVID, there were public funds and benefits that were distributed by the federal government, by the state governments and local governments. But those people do not benefit because they were out of the system. Mm-hmm. Some of them had rent debts. Some of them had problems of survival of even, and most of their problems were where to go and how to legalize themselves. Against also the same COVID back home caused a lot of economic hardship around the world. And that economic hardship came also with political hardship, So what happened is that COVID was so devastating for the economies of West African states that it really changed the whole fabric of economic policy making, economic development, and how to help the poor. It ran entrenched on poverty. So that what we began to see, what we normally want people to come to the US is to apply for the visa and so forth. Now the quest for survival is such that people do not do that. Now you have African refugees or migrants. Some of them you will call economic refugees, but some of them are indeed genuine refugees in the sense that COVID itself has changed the fabric of the politics and distribution system in Africa. So you begin to have, even countries you think that we are peaceful, you begin to have their people finding their way to the Mexican border, finding their way to the Latin American countries, joining the caravan like people do, and get to the Mexican border. Now, US policy is such that when you get to the Mexican border, if you can, that is why, what they do is they try to see if you have somebody to stay with. So they will give you an order to appear. So people come with those. But then the system is so saturated that when they give you that order to appear, sometimes they may give you a date to appear, a date to show up at the local offices of the Homeland Security 2 or 3 years ahead. Mm-hmm. So you are expected to be here 2 or 3 years ahead. Maybe you have a paper to show that you are allowed to be here. But how to survive, So this is the two types of refugees we had here. Those who were here, we are forced to go underground, and COVID had forced them to come out to crying for survival. And the other refugees that come out of, come through the border. So there was the wisdom of the government or the city of Wisconsin and Tunji himself. He's modest, but he's the brain behind all of this. And that to come up with this emergency program. What do we provide? When people come, as I said, the biggest thing is to try to legalize them. Mm-hmm. We tell them that the fact that you have that order of release shows that at least you've been allowed legally. That I would not say that you are undocumented because you came and you have been allowed. And that the tendency is that if you can show that you have skills or learn skills and so that you can survive, when the time comes for you to appear, it will be easy because people will know that you will be able to support themselves. So we try to help them to normalize their legal status through that they will have work permits. Lawyers are very expensive, and we have lawyers that are understanding. We try to help them initially, hoping that when they get their work permit, they'll be able to pay the rest. We also help them with grocery. The little we have, we target that what will help them and enable them to survive for 3 months. We also give them bus passes to move around. And then we emphasize to them that if you want to survive here, you must have skills. And that requires job training. We are fortunate that we are at a period where the U.S. economy is expanding. There is always a shortage of jobs. If you have skills, hunt for an employer who will provide job training for you. Hopefully, if you get that, that employer will support your plight for legalization. And we do promise them. We ourselves are trying to expand our capacity to direct them to the type of job training they will get. We are trying to, but they live with relatives and people who know the system better. And we try to promise them that if you have somebody who is willing to train you, if there is any cost relating to the job training, we will provide those costs. We also encourage them that, you must learn English, you must be, And the education system between America and here are different. Now, the irony is that even if you are educated outside America, people here look at the standards here. Like, for example, if you have a degree back home, like Gambia was colonized by the British and our official language is English. Our institutions and learning centers are all in English. But if you want to come here to learn in American English, one of the things they will tell you, take TOEFL. TOEFL, I don't know, to show that you can read and understand English. So we say to them that you should try to have some document to show that you are fluent and literate and you can function in English. And one of the places we direct them that MATC runs a beautiful program, English as a first language. Try to get a certificate. Here it's a society that has standards. You must prove that you are able to do that by showing a piece of paper. So we encourage them to, and we promise them that if there are costs related to that, we will. Fortunately, those programs also have financial aid. We also promise them that if you are sick, don't hide and die, but try to go to emergency. If you go to the emergency of any hospital, they will treat you. And if you have prescriptions, we provide that we will. So these are some of the helps that we do.
Well, and they're very important, as you mentioned. The pandemic ended up impacting everybody, but then if you were undocumented, then it's even twice as much because any of the stimulus money or anything that was going around, didn't qualify for it either. Mm-hmm. And so thinking about what was the global impact of the COVID pandemic, as well as then added responsibility of then the people who couldn't lost their jobs if they were working in the food industry or if they were not essential workers, that they also ended up losing their job and how much things were stacked up against them in that particular moment. I also appreciated going through and talking about how do we do the talents and the skills in the language that people can start working on while they're also waiting on their immigration process. Unfortunately, we know that the immigration system is broken in the U.S., and there's very, very few paths that people have to be able to adjust their status or to legalize their status. And so I also appreciated talking back about what are the different possible things that you could do while you're waiting or while you're expecting to have things happen. You mentioned people coming through the Mexico-U.S. border and even Title 42 changing right now where you had to wait in Mexico. Now that some people are allowed to come in and be able to wait as well. So even not knowing what the next change is as our legislation is constantly happening. So the center's response to be able to support all of those changes, consistent changes, and be the constant support for the whole community has been really, really powerful. And I appreciate you kind of talking about all of those different steps that are needed, because this is why we need these supports more and these resources more. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate that, and thank you for sharing that information as well. Sorry, did you want to add before?
Yeah. Just to say that, even though we know that the immigration system, as people say, is broken in the U.S., but imagine the U.S. with all of the different races and so on that are in the U.S., try to see the blending of all of those people and compare that with some other Western countries, European countries that are, kind of monolithic kind of thing, and see the difference. Whatever anybody may say, life is happier here than many of those places. I've traveled into a lot of places. There are many places I won't stay, other than if I just go there for official reasons and I just stay there and I'm getting out at the earliest possible time. It's different here in the U.S. Mm-hmm. The diversity in everything is a pleasure that other countries emulate, right? In fact, some countries now, maybe because of COVID or maybe because of some other thing, Brexit, whatever, they are now actually going to some African states, countries, to ask that people should migrate to their countries, right? The U.S. is in a unique position that people want to come here, right? I mean, the whole issue with the broken immigration system is that Congress just needs to really settle down. All of them know what to do. They just remove politics out of it, then settle down and exchange all of the forefathers. That's how they did many things that we are all enjoying till today. Everybody, statue this, statue that, and so on, that were all incorporated into the laws that people are respecting. And the country is better for it.
Yeah, right. And by no means did I mean to say that it wasn't the land of opportunity and like what people are looking for. So, yes. By no means did I mean to say that. I was just thinking about like how hard it is for somebody that's working really hard, that's trying. As you mentioned, like people are willing to work, like they're coming, they're giving it their all, they're learning the language, they're doing everything, and yet there doesn't seem to be like a pathway. The pathways for adjustments are very small. The categories are so small that you could have somebody who's like you mentioned, being educated in another country, and sometimes even that doesn't get validated here, even though you've gone through that.
Yeah, Gerardo, I wanted to add that, usually when we talk about DACA, we don't think of Africans or African immigrants here in the U.S., but there are so many African immigrants who are also, documented. The reason being that once they start the legal process to regularize their stay here, and the process it goes at a snail's pace. So this delay and the slowness of the process makes some of them, their kids, age out, and then they go to school, but they cannot regularize because there's no pathway. We are not oblivious of the fact that people coming through the border, people who are overstaying their visas, some people come with their little kids who go to school. Some have gone all the way through to graduate programs, but there are people who are struggling to get the authorization, just that piece of paper to tell them that you are good, you've been in this country for so many years. And so personally, I think that if the different immigrant groups and communities come together and say, well, it's not only affecting just the Latinos, it's affecting so many people, and we should do something about it. And that's where probably they take away the politics and do something, because at the end of the day, everyone pays taxes, and they don't say, well, you are documented or you don't have the right paper, so you're not going to. People pay taxes, because how the IRS managed to find them, that is a mystery, but they pay taxes, and so let's make people's lives easier. DACA doesn't only affect one group of people, it affects everyone in all households.
Yes. And thank you for sharing that, because I agree 100% that how do we make this a bit easier for people, for families, for ourselves too, to do all that. So I agree 100% with that. Thank you all for sharing that. I feel like that's important as well. So as we continue thinking about the African population here in Madison and the surrounding area and the growth in the surrounding area, can you speak a little bit about the demographic changes? We've talked a little bit about some of the groups that have come through and some of the different groups that we have here in Madison. Can you talk about some of the changes that you've noticed in terms of like the different populations?
Yes, thank you again. I mean, the changes are expected. In fact, that's one of the reasons why we're now focusing on how we have to assist these people, because some of them don't know any other country but here. So they cannot just take their passports and say, I want to go to this country. They are not going to like it because they have never been there. They didn't grow up there. The education system is different. And so what we have is what we have here, and then people have to develop. And before you know it, people are growing every day, all right? So, and they have to be useful to themselves and the society, the community. So the changes that we're seeing is that the younger ones are actually staying here. Fortunately, many of them become citizens, and therefore life is easier for them if they can put in the efforts and so on. So that is what we are seeing. Many of the African immigrants have gotten married and they've had children, and the children have to be in schools and they have to be trained so that we don't have problems in the future. But again, the culture, somebody says that if you forget your root, it's like, I don't remember if I quote it correctly. If you forget your root, you are done for. Something like that. Right. You cannot forget your roots. You cannot. As we mentioned, all of the people coming from Africa, it's a whole different thing, but I don't want to digress to that now, talking about the effect of colonization and so on, especially when things were done in such a manner that the Africans were not at the table at the time that they were doing the divisions. If you've read something about the partitioning of Africa, there was no regard to the empires that were there, the system of governments that were there, the culture of the people, the different ethnic groups that were in African countries at that time. People just met at a table and they drew lines. So therefore, you could have a situation where somebody of this ethnic group is living in this country that is probably French-speaking, and the other half of the ethnic group is living in another country with a different language. So all of those things are there, and that itself did many damages to the way African countries developed through the political system. Because we talked about some of the ethnic strifes and so on. People wanted to support their own ethnic people, so they kind of disagree with whoever is ruling, and then they make so much noise, military takeover and everything resulted. So all of those things are there. That's part of the history, but we're not looking back. Okay. We're not looking back, we are looking forward. How do you manage and make progress, in everybody's lives? So some of the people that are coming here, they really have gone through all of those things. But here, for the children, everybody's talking the same. Everybody's, doing the same thing. They are in schools. They are in, workplaces and so on. So things are changing for the better. I think generally, the children are blending very well, but at the same time, they cannot forget their cultures, because there is a reason why those cultures became popular in their, where they're coming from. So you really have to. In fact, one of the things that we should also mention is that, like in the United States, there are a lot of Black Americans, right? They all came from Africa. Yeah, they all came from America. We all know the story, but again, let's not start talking about that right now. But the cultures are there. Sometimes when I see some of the things that are done, you can easily identify that these cultures are from Africa, right? So there's a marriage and you're jumping over a broom. those are African cultures. So again, not forgetting those things is very helpful for self-satisfying to whoever that has that culture. And we should always encourage that culture and make sure that we exchange these cultures, not for any other purpose, but for the excitement of all of us.
No, and I appreciate how you framed that as well, too.
Just to add a few on the demographic change, what happened was during the 70s and 80s, and even in the 60s, that most Africans who come here, as Tunji said earlier, people who came here to study, either they were sponsored by themselves or governments and so forth. Most of them studied in big universities, worked hard and got their degrees and went home. But some, because of their talents, they were assimilated here. They found good jobs and so forth. They marry and they have children. Today, some of them are the elders. But then there are their children who were born here, and they are Americans. Now, there is this second generation which COVID perpetuated, as I said, people coming through the border, and it's a sizable thing. But these are young, vibrant, talented Africans with skills. All they want is a little jack, a little support, and they are ready to go to work. And hence the emphasis is how do we help those people.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that as well. And one of the things that we had talked about was one of the programs that you mentioned, the Undocumented Immigrant Program. The other one that was mentioned was the Transitional Cultural Literacy Program. One of the things that I have on my notes is that program was targeted at 5 to 10-year-olds. And some of the times they were a little bit older, like 12 to 13. Is there anything else that you wanted to add in terms of that particular program and how that helps with the students?
Yeah, so the program was created to ensure that especially the second generation Africans born here, going through the school system here, would be culturally grounded in their parents' cultures and heritage. So that was the goal. And culture involves arts, involves the dialogue, involves even knowing where your parents come from. Some kids surprisingly grew up and they maybe 9, 10 years old and they don't even know the country where their parents come from. So that was why the leaders of African Center decided to create a program. So the program started 2019. It was in person at the Goodman Community Center. And it was also supported by the Madison School District. So there were so many volunteers from the community helping as well. COVID hit, it was transitioned online, and the program was suspended in 2021. However, we have continued the program in one way or the other. So we try as much as possible that every summer we take the kids out on tours to ensure that they meet up with each other, talk about things, and also go on these educational field trips. So last year, we were able to organize a field trip to the America's Black Holocaust Museum in Milwaukee through a grant from the United Way Micro Investments Program. So with that small grants, we were able to take them to learn about the history, because the history of Black Americans and African immigrants, they are inherently linked. And so learning about the history, you end up knowing that we are all the same people and we have the same identity. We are dealing with similar issues. And so it was a great opportunity for the kids to learn about that and see the horrifying stories of how people took our own brothers and sisters through terrible, terrible acts. And so it was a great experience. So that was last year, 2022. And this year, we are organizing what we call the STEM Day, taking the kids in our community to the UW Science and Engineering Center, the Space Place, and also the Wisconsin Science Museum So we are going on a space exploration. Yeah. And hopefully we will see some planets. Yeah. It's going to be the 25th and 26th of August. So this month. And we are hoping that so many kids will join. So these are some of the ways we have continued the program. And as we bring our kids together and they see people like them having the same background, it's in a way continuing the culture and ensuring that they will always remember their background. Yeah.
That is awesome that you were able to continue the program even if it hasn't been in the same model, in the same process, but that you were able to modify it to a field trip and now to the university as well with that. One of the other programs that I had here listed was the Emergency Assistant, or it used to be the Pandemic Assistance Program. Can you talk a little bit more about that program?
Yeah, that program is ending, as you know, or has actually ended. We're just rounding up the whole thing. But that, again, was in partnership with the city of Madison. The city of Madison has been very, very cooperative. We are very, very supportive of all of the things that we've been doing, and we're very grateful to them. A lot of people were helped during that time. It was nice that the African Center was involved because that created a trust in the people. Generally, people migrating to the U.S. generally will sign a paper that says that you cannot be a charge on the public, right? So people are very conscious of that because they don't want to be thrown back to 9,000 miles. So they're very, very conscious of that, so they will not do anything. So culturally, they will not come forward to say we need this. And we all know that the COVID situation was different. First of all, it was a disease, a pandemic that we did not even identify quickly, right? So a lot of people didn't do nothing. I mean, they were just hoping that something would be done. Eventually, something was done. So those people didn't come forward. But when we got involved and then we started telling the community, this is what the city is doing, this is what the government is doing, these are the resources that are available, there is no discrimination on this, there is no discrimination on this. They had some trust in us, and that really changed a number of things.
That is awesome that you were able to build that community to make sure that they could take advantage of those resources too, and not necessarily have that fear of not wanting to use the resources because of that. Yeah. What are your words of advice as we have this podcast going? We talked a lot about all the amazing work that the center is doing and the different ways that the center is supporting all the community, from the students to the family to the workers in the communities. What would be your final word, or what words of advice would you want to share?
Just to say, I'll just continue to emphasize the services we provide. We provide language services. Now, in terms of languages, Africa is unique. If you go to Europe, you will go to France, millions of people speak the same language. You go to England, millions of people, the whole country speaks the same language, Dutch. Not only that, if you take the English language, the French language, the Dutch language, there is cross-fertilization. There are common words in all those languages. If you go to Africa, it's different. For example, if you go to Gambia, Gambia has a population of 2 million people. Within 2 million people, there are almost 14 different languages. Now, the uniqueness about that 14 languages are so different. It's if these two languages are from different planets. There is no similar words or, the sounds of the languages and the way they do things and the cultures surrounding those languages are very different. This is why, for example, as I said, I grew with almost 14 languages surrounding me. And any African you see would speak more than 2-3 languages that you will assimilate. So one of the unique things that we provide here is language services. We try to have a pool of translators and interpreters. So if there are organizations out there needing services in African languages, kindly contact us. We're working with the city and we invite donor grants. It's a noble cause, and we invite anybody wanting to work with us. We have a good website, a functional website. You can go to our website and you can contact us.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I have in my notes that there's over 2,000 languages spoken in Africa altogether. What about you? Any last words or last thoughts that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I would mention that talking about the educational aspect, there is strength in diversity, and diversity itself is a resource, and diversity helps you to be open-minded. And without open-mindedness, there are so many positive things that come out of it. And so I would advise people to immerse themselves in other people's cultures, because that way you meet unique perspectives. Every immigrant you meet has a unique history, a unique perspective, and you learn something valuable out of it. In Madison here, we have the Africa Fest, is the annual African festival that comes off in the summer, and there is one coming up August 19th at the McPike Park on the east side. There's going to be Africa Center prominently featured there. We have a table, so anyone who wants to visit can come visit our table. And there are going to be so many cultural displays. There's going to be so many foods from the continent. So, it's an opportunity to taste some food from Africa. And there's going to be fashion, so many things. So people should definitely come and experience a little part of Africa at that festival. The African Center also partnered with the UW African Studies program, and we are going to have a community lecture series starting the last Wednesday in September, and it's going to be at the UW South Madison Partnership. It's another way that we are working to bring academia and community together so that people would come and have this immersive talks about the culture, the politics, the life in Africa. And the program is open to the general public, and everyone and anyone would come and should come to listen to these topics and the talks from the experts and researchers from the African continent. Aside that, there's going to be food before the lectures. So it's also another great opportunity to enjoy African food at least once a month. So starting in September, the last Wednesday in September, there's going to be food, and from there, October and thereof. Yeah.
That is going to be awesome. And thank you for sharing all those events and how people should be able to go and explore more and be able to be in community with. And the food is always something that gets me. So as you guys were talking, I was getting hungry. So
yes, I would just end up by laying emphasis about our willingness to cooperate. Anybody who wants to work with us with our undocumented immigrant program. As we mentioned, these funds were provided by the city of Madison, but it's a unique program of its kind as far as African immigrants are concerned in the whole Midwest. We had immigrants from Illinois, from Minnesota, from Iowa, from Indiana, but since the money was provided by the city of Madison, it is restricted. But still we are registering refugees because the funds have been exhausted. We are still registering refugees, hoping to partner with anybody who wants to help refugees. So we're throwing it out there. Anybody who wants to help African refugees, we would want to partner with you.
Thank you. And can people make the donation through the website, or what would be the best way to have donations?
Through the website is okay, or by check or by credit card. Either way is fine, and we will promptly acknowledge all donations given to us.
Yeah, so on our website, there are different ways of donating. So once they go to our website, africancentermadison.org, and they go to the donation page, they will see that you can donate to us by check. Just put African Center. The address is 6314 Odana Road, Suite 14, Madison, Wisconsin 53719. And it will come to us. We'll acknowledge it. They can also send us an email, info@africancentermadison.org. We will get it, and we'll reach out to the person to give them more information about how they can donate. Otherwise, they can donate through PayPal on our website, and it will come as well.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing all the sites and all the donations. So Tunji, what about for yourself? What would be your final thoughts or your final words
It's been great so far, and we continue to look forward for greater things. We see certain things happening through different collaborations. We've talked about the cuisine is good. Generally, historical events, we want to be bringing some archaeological findings from Africa, people that will come into the community and make presentations of what they have found. Everybody talks about the Egyptian pyramids and the dummies and all the rest of them, right? We read them in newspapers, but the people that are doing it and are continuing to do these things, we can bring them here and it will be open to the public and people can come in and see what is going on. We really want to get the African Historical Library into the center. Mm-hmm. And we want for people to come in, just immerse themselves in the things. If they want to understand certain things about Africa, they can come in and see that. We are going to get corporations from all African embassies to help us with that, in addition to, the corporation here. I know embassies don't have money to donate, but the materials, can be very educative, very helpful. We think that is going to happen. And if anybody is interested in traveling to any African country, one of our goals is to make sure that we have links on our website or the library where people can read about where they are going and what things to expect. At least, calm down some nerves before they go. Right. So, this has been very helpful. We appreciate these discussions that we had this evening. Actually, I was thinking that we'll just come in and talk, a few minutes and disappear, but it has actually been, quite interesting. So we thank you for this initiative.
And I appreciate all you taking time to come and talk about the center too, and all the amazing work that is going on in the center, both sharing your personal experience as well as what the services that the center has. So thank you. And thank you for all the work that you're doing as well.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
So with that, we're going to go ahead and close this episode. And I hope everybody has an amazing day. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Educators and Immigration Podcast. You can find out more information about us at www.educatorsandImmigration.com. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share our podcast with your family, friends, and colleagues. You could also leave us a review and rate us on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify. Thank you again, and I hope you have a great day.